Hello there, and I am very excited to say for this episode we are talking about one of the greatest characters in Star Trek, Lwaxana Troi, daughter of the 5th House, holder of the sacred chalice of Rix, heir to the holy rings of Beta Z. Who are you? Who am I compared to that? I am nobody. Of course, Lwaxana Troi is most famous for being the quite annoying, sometimes insufferable, but always endearing mother of Deanna Troi. And yeah, I can't in a single video cover every one of her appearances in Star Trek, so this is going to be a bit of an overview of the character, her personality, and some of the highlights of her quite amazing life. So let's start out at the beginning, the early bits. Lwaxana Troi, of course, was Deanna's mother, but she was not only the mother to Deanna, she also had another daughter called Kestra Troi, a child that Deanna would name her daughter after. Also, there was an unnamed son. She basically had 3 kids, but only one would survive. Very sad when that kind of thing happens. Now, Deanna, of course, would go on to marry Commander Riker, or Captain Riker as it would eventually become, and they would go on to have multiple children, which would also then be her grandchildren. But we're not here to talk about her extended family. We want to know about the woman herself, don't we? God, is there stuff to know. Fuck me, this woman is amazing. She is so much fun. I defy you to not enjoy the episodes that she appears in. I can see why some people might find her a little overbearing and a little much, but she's chewing the scenery in every moment she's on the screen. She is graceful, beautiful, elegant, and commanding. All the things you really can't help but really love. Her flirtatious relationship with Patrick Stewart's character, Captain Picard, is it's French kiss. It's beautiful. It is so entertaining. Picard can never just turn around to her and just go, "Oh, shut up, woman, stop it, and stop reading my mind whenever I look at you. I'm not thinking about you like that." He can't do it. He can't. So, but he can read Shakespeare to her. He can confess his undying love in his mind. She'll always read it, and she'll always see that. But, I mean, realistically, she knew she was only whining him up. She knew Picard had no interest. My guess was, I didn't think she was really reading his thoughts at all, because I think she had more respect for him and other people in that. She was merely quite aware that she was winding him up. She probably was attracted to him, but knew he wasn't attracted to her, and that he had enough respect and grace about himself to not call her out on it. But at the same time, that grace and that dignity that he had was entertaining to her to kind of undermine. Meaning, deep down, inside Lwaxana was a little rebel. A little piece of a child just going, "Yee, this is going to be fun," to wind him up a little bit. And who would blame her? I mean, Captain Picard did sometimes sit there a little bit like there was a stick rammed up there, you know? So, he didn't need taking down, but taking him down might have been kind of satisfying every now and again, because he oozed dignity, and people with dignity are it's always amusing when you see one of them put into a situation that they don't necessarily have the right personality to deal with. With regards to just how awesome this character is, there's somebody else who I know who has some additional thoughts to share on this beloved Trek character. So, just for the moment, Jane Talks Trek is invading Nerd World Empire for the next couple of minutes.
Hi everyone, Jane Talks Trek here, and what can I say about Lwaxana Troi? I can't say her name consistently, that's for damn sure. I've just covered all 3 of her episodes of Deep Space Nine over on my channel, and honestly, I really like her as a character. I can see why people could find her annoying, but for me, it's refreshing to have a sexually liberated older woman portrayed on a show like this. I think they've got the balance of lusty nuisance and heartfelt warmth just right. Otherwise she wouldn't work, because let's face it, she's a bit of a sex pest sometimes. The best part about her character is how she interacts with people and how they react to her, such as Deanna's ongoing exasperation, although Lwaxana protects her, like when she gets her a blanket first when they're both naked in Majel Troi, Picard sneaking around trying to avoid her, but she acts like he's happy to see her, and her deadpan delivery when dealing with irritating situations, especially when the Ferengi are involved. Majel Barrett does a fantastic job portraying the character and is a big part of why it works so well. But I've got to talk about Lwaxana and Odo. I haven't watched Deep Space Nine in a big way, but The Forsaken, Fascination, and The Muse are a delightful trio of episodes, as even without context, they work as a standalone mini-arc. The scene where she takes off her wig in the turbo lift, to holding Odo in her dress, to her encouraging his feelings for Kira, to her bucking the norm and recognising the function of the structure in his quarters, all lead nicely to Odo's heartfelt speech at their wedding, where he realises just how meaningful she has been in his life. Lwaxana Troi for me is just as important a character as Majel Barrett is iconic to the franchise.
Well, thank you, Jane. That was awesome. For all of you out there, her channel is Jane Talks Trek. It is linked in the description box below. Please check out her channel, give her a subscribe, and check out her series of videos that she has also just done on Lwaxana Troi's episodes in Deep Space Nine. I think you'll find them very entertaining and a lot of fun. But now, back to my coverage of Lwaxana Troi. As I said, she would pop up from time to time in The Next Generation and generally make everyone's life a nightmare, sort of. She was the kind of person that, as much as she was a character to be around, she would be difficult to be around. But her character was more nuanced than that. She wasn't just the annoying mother-in-law to Commander Riker. She wasn't just the overbearing ambassador that Picard had to smile and put on a happy face for. This was a powerful and strong-willed individual who had a strong sense of justice, right, wrong, and wasn't willing to compromise her own beliefs or her ethics for anybody. She passionately loved her daughter. She passionately loved the men in her life who she had loved, such as her ex-husband. The woman was, of course, widowed with the loss of Deanna's father. She would remarry again. One marriage would be annulled, another would be divorced. It was a bit like a Henry VIII thing, but with happier endings. And 3 less of them. And she was a much better person. It was nothing like Henry VIII. It just reads like it. It's like widowed, annulled, divorced. The divorced was Odo, which is interesting. But anyway, we're getting off topic again. She was an absolute joy to have around. And her fierce personality, although sometimes overbearing, had its uses. She was an outstanding diplomat. She was a passionate, emotional, and loving woman, and this rubbed off on the people around her. She was easily likable and was always friendly towards everyone that she encountered, giving everyone a level and measure of respect, although it did seem like perhaps she was being not malicious, but sort of belligerently aggressive in her tone towards people. The truth is, as she spoke like that to everybody, she expected a certain level of respect to be given to her, judged by her station in life and the things that she had accomplished as an ambassador for the Federation and for Beta Z, but also she was still giving you that same level of courtesy and respect. And she had a strong following of people that would always be there for her when they were needed. And although sometimes in small doses some people would find her difficult, that tenacity and that strength and that passion for her daughter, little things like when her and Deanna were abducted by a little troll of an alien Ferengi, Damon, they were both transported off the Enterprise onto his Marauder, but he left their clothes behind. Her first instinct was to cover up her daughter, to give her her dignity back before worrying about herself. She would also go on to, although it never explicitly states it's what happened, to prevent the Ferengi from taking advantage of Deanna, she would basically, how to phrase this politely for YouTube, sacrifice her own dignity to the Ferengi in order to prevent him doing it to her daughter. Eventually, of course, she would make that Ferengi pay for that misdeed. But it shows the strength of her character and the depth of her love for her daughter, her devotion to her child, superseded any other interests. But when it came to being ambassadorial and a representative of the Federation, despite the, rambunctious nature, her almost overbearing personality, and how loud she was still a fierce diplomat who always looked out for the best interest of the Federation. Sometimes the sort of loudness belied the sort of subtlety and intelligence that was behind it, the sort of intrigue and manipulation that was going on behind the distraction that was her flamboyant personality, which came naturally to her because that's simply who she was. We saw her also appear periodically in Deep Space Nine, where she developed a strong interest in Odo. But despite the fact that Odo clearly never reciprocated that affection, and initially he was one of the ones that found her a little difficult to deal with, but like Picard, he couldn't simply tell her, "Bugger off, you insufferable woman." He had to be polite because she was an ambassador. But when she realized how much affection he had for Major Kira, she would encourage him to share that affection and not hide it, and basically instantly, although continue to flirt with him and generally just be herself, she, like with Picard, understood that nothing was going to happen with Odo, and she was okay with that. She didn't need him to verify herself, basically. She wasn't defined by her relationships. She had a strong enough personality to be defined purely by herself, and it's what made her such a great character. To be a mature, intelligent, thoughtful, emotional, and powerful person who has built themselves a career, built themselves a life, raised her child. Her child has gone on to be successful and then have children of her own. All of the boxes for what makes you a successful person in life, to achieve something for yourself, for your family, and for your entire species, she ticked all of them and was a fantastic character as a consequence of this. As I said at the beginning of this video, I'm not going to break down every single episode. That's something I think you should go to Jane Talks Trek for. Her episodes are very much a very detailed and thoughtful breakdown of the individual episodes. Me, I just like to celebrate the character, and yeah, she could be loud, yes, she could be abrasive, and yes, she could even potentially be considered annoying, but she was always lovable, always there for you if you needed her, and she was always useful as well. It wasn't like she was simply a distraction. The things she would accomplish and assist with on mission were always to the greater benefit of the Federation and, by consequence, the crew of the Enterprise, or Deep Space Nine. But let's leave the Lwaxana Troi character to one side for now, because I think between this episode and my sort of, quite frankly, I think she's a fantastic character. I think she's one of the best written, certainly one of the most stylistically interesting in the way that she dresses, presents herself, and the confidence that she oozes from every inch of dialogue and just presence on the screen is more than enough to justify any position I have of thinking she is one of the greatest characters ever written in Star Trek. And a lot of that comes down to what I'll move on to here, and that is Majel Barrett herself. Majel Barrett Roddenberry. She was a force of nature in her own right. I'd like to think that in some ways she was probably a lot like that character. She was legendary for her involvement with Star Trek, helping get off the ground, being in it from the original pilot episode, playing Number One, to playing Nurse Chapel in the original series, and of course being the computer voice as well as Lwaxana Troi. It's quite, I think, fairly common knowledge among Star Trek fans, but I'm going to reiterate it here anyway, that upon her death, and she died in 2008, she recorded a considerable amount of dialogue so that her voice could still be used for future iterations of Star Trek. And it is sad, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because it is sad now that for the first time since her passing, a Star Trek series has been made that doesn't use her voice as the voice of the computer. It's been announced that her voice will no longer be the voice of the computers in things like Star Trek Discovery, which was inevitable. It was, but it's still sad. For this woman was so important as a Star Trek fan, something that I grew up with. Star Trek taught me morality when I was a child, and I didn't even realize it was teaching me morality. It's been a part of my life, so much so that I'm British, in case you weren't aware. I had to work pretty damn hard as a child. I'm kind of autistic and antisocial, so, you know, people, me, don't get along. At the outside, anyway. I watched a lot of television, as you can probably tell from the amount of knowledge in here that's just in here. I mean, math, science, don't need that. Trivia. And I actually picked up an American twang to my accent, to the point that to this day I sometimes have to fight myself to not say vitamin and pronounce things in an American way. Star Trek got a lot to answer for that, because it was one of the main things I watched, but it was an integral part of my childhood, and as a result, by extension, in a way, so then was Majel Roddenberry. The thing she helped to create as part of a team, but as one of the driving forces behind it, and a woman who was involved in it intimately, on so many levels for so many years, to create something that not only I love, but millions of people around the world have loved, to this day still love, and new generations of fans to this day are growing up and loving it all over again. Even though, let's face it, the original series is a little hard to sit through. Spock's brain. Always Spock's brain. But because of how important she was, I think it's worth remembering the beautiful and talented and force of nature herself, Majel Roddenberry. Because she, if it was not for her, the thing I love, the thing I enjoy now, and I'm currently watching, for example, Season 3 of Star Trek Picard as of the making of this episode, and I'm absolutely loving it, that enjoyment wouldn't have been possible. That was something I would miss in my life. The time I've spent at Star Trek conventions, myself and my partner have been to multiple conventions. The things I have enjoyed, model collecting, DVD collecting, the rewatch value, sometimes to turn my brain off and just have it on in the background, to actually being intricately involved, to creating an entire YouTube channel pretty much around the entire subject of Star Trek. I like a lot of different sci-fi, which is why this channel doesn't just cover Star Trek, because I do like to cover other things, but I guarantee I could just make a channel on Star Trek. In fact, not that I'm going to do this, I could probably make an entire series for a month, maybe longer, purely on just one aspect of this universe, which would be Lwaxana Troi. I could go through her episodes. I could go on about her wardrobe and the eccentric hairstyles and clothing that she wore or didn't wear in some episodes. How her interactions with Picard are symbolic of the sort of nature and the duality of the culture of the 24th century, and how humanity has become something that is kind of detached from its passionate ancestry, whereas she represents this living energy almost that someone like Picard has perhaps forgotten in this endless pursuit of atheism and science. I could make an entire series on it. I could make an entire series just on the technobabble of Star Trek. I could make endless episodes on top 10s. You could make, I mean, there's others out there like Trek Central and Trek Yards, Trek Culture. I mean, I'm not going to, but you could. And the point is, this has defined me as a person. A lot of my philosophical beliefs, a lot of my moral beliefs, and the way I see the world has been defined by an ethical structure that's been put in my head, in my raising, by this. Star Trek has defined that for me, and for many other people, and Majel Roddenberry as a driving force behind that should be remembered for the glorious, beautiful woman that she was, and her lasting contribution to Star Trek is forever going to be the flamboyant, rambunctious, loud, obnoxious, sometimes annoying and insufferable, but always delightful Lwaxana Troi. And that is bringing me to the end of this video. I did feel I wanted to give her a little bit more of a tribute. So as much as this was really an episode about Lwaxana Troi, it was really an episode about Majel Barrett and how we should remember her. So with that said, we're at the end of this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon if you've made it all the way to the end of the video. I do, again, genuinely hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you've made it all the way to the end of the episode and not enjoyed it, Well, I don't understand why you do that. But thank you anyway. Like, share and subscribe. Also, check out Jane Talks Trek. Like, share and subscribe over there. Comment that you came there from this channel. That'll be nice to see. And hopefully I'll be doing more collaborations with her in the future. I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy making these. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving a like, share and a subscribe, and maybe checking out the other videos on the screen right now, and in the description box below there are links to my other social media accounts.